The blood-curdling scream pierced the stale air of Shafter, Texas. But instead of rushing to help, the group of rough-looking men at the saloon's corner table erupted into raucous laughter until the unmistakable click of a revolver being cocked silenced them, followed by the acrid smell of gunpowder that still clung to the barrel of Preston Drake's Colt. Zara Thomas had never meant to cause such a scene in the dusty little town. She'd only arrived that morning on the stagecoach from St. Louis, her worldly possessions packed into 2 leather trunks, and her dreams of a new beginning tucked carefully alongside her few remaining family mementos. The year was 1878, and the West was still wild enough to make a woman traveling alone an oddity and apparently, in Shafter, a target. "I believe the lady made it clear she wasn't interested in your company," Preston said, his voice low and steady as he kept his smoking gun trained on the 3 men who moments before had been backing Zara against the bar, pawing at her traveling coat. The largest of the men, a red-faced brute with a beard stained yellow from tobacco, slowly raised his hands. "Now hold on, Cowboy. We was just having ourselves some fun." "Didn't sound like fun to me," Preston replied, nodding slightly toward Zara. "Madam, are you all right?" Zara straightened her shoulders, trying to regain her composure. At 22, she'd faced her share of hardships, but nothing had prepared her for the rough nature of Texas men. "Yes, thank you," she managed, her voice steadier than her hands. The saloon had gone deadly quiet. Even the piano player had stopped mid-tune, his fingers hovering above the yellowed keys. The bartender, a balding man with a sweaty brow, looked nervously between Preston and the 3 troublemakers. "Drake," he called out, "don't go causing no more trouble in my establishment." "Sheriff Wilkins is still sore about last month's incident." Preston's eyes never left the men as he spoke. "Tell these gentlemen to apologize to the lady, and we'll consider the matter closed." The 3 men exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. Finally, the bearded one spat on the floor. "Sorry, miss," he muttered, though his eyes said otherwise. Preston slowly lowered his gun but kept it in his hand. "Now you boys find somewhere else to finish your drinks, far away from this lady." As they skulked off to a distant corner, Preston finally turned his full attention to Zara. She was beautiful, he noted, despite the travel dust that clung to her dark hair and the flush of fear and indignation that colored her cheeks. Her eyes were a striking shade of green, reminding him of the rare calm waters of the Pecos River after a spring rain. "Thank you," Zara said, smoothing down her rumpled traveling dress. "I'm afraid I'm not accustomed to such forward behavior." A hint of a smile touched Preston's lips, softening the hard lines of his sun-weathered face. "Welcome to Shafter, Miss Thomas, Zara Thomas, Preston Drake." He holstered his weapon and tipped his hat. "What brings a lady like yourself to a dust trap like Shafter?" Zara hesitated, unsure how much to share with this stranger who just saved her from who knows what fate. Yet something in his steady gaze made her feel she could trust him. "I've come to take ownership of the millinery shop. My Aunt Harriet passed last month, and I've inherited her business." Preston's eyebrows rose slightly. "Harriet Thomas was your aunt. She was a fine woman. Town hasn't been the same without her. You knew her well." Everyone knew Miss Harriet, best hats west of the Mississippi, or so the ladies claimed. He gestured to the bartender. "Tom, get Miss Thomas some fresh water, would you?" The bartender hurriedly complied, setting a relatively clean glass before Zara. "Thank you," she said, taking a small sip. "I've never been to Texas before. My aunt and I corresponded regularly, but I never had the opportunity to visit." Preston nodded thoughtfully. "It's different out here. Not always gentle, especially to newcomers, but good people too once you get past the rough edges. Like yourself." The words slipped out before Zara could stop them, and she immediately felt heat rise to her cheeks. A genuine smile broke across Preston's face, transforming his rugged features. "I've got my share of rough edges, Miss Thomas, but I try to be on the right side of things when it counts." Tom, the bartender, cleared his throat. "Miss, if you're Harriet's niece, your shop's just down the street." "Been closed up since she passed. Mrs. Holloway from the boarding house has the keys. She's been looking after the place." Zara nodded her thanks. "I should probably find Mrs. Holloway then. My trunks are still at the stagecoach office." "I'd be happy to escort you," Preston offered. "Those men might think twice about causing trouble again, but it's best not to test that theory." Outside, the Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty Main Street. Wooden buildings lined both sides, some proudly painted, others weathered to a silvery gray. A few horses stood hitched to posts, swishing their tails against persistent flies. "Have you been in Shafter long, Mr. Drake?" Zara asked as they walked, conscious of the curious glances from townspeople. "Preston, please. And no, I drift through mostly. Got some land about 10 miles east, but I come into town for supplies and the occasional game of cards." He gestured to a modest 2-story building with a small sign that read Holloway Boarding House hanging from the porch. "Here we are, Mrs. Holloway's a good woman, a bit nosy, but she'll look after you." The door opened before they reached it, revealing a plump woman with silver-streaked hair pinned severely atop her head. Her shrewd eyes took in both Zara and Preston in one sweeping glance. "Well, well. If it isn't Preston Drake escorting a young lady to my doorstep, will wonders never cease?" Despite her words, there was warmth in her tone. Preston tipped his hat. "Mrs. Holloway, this is Miss Zara Thomas, Harriet's niece from back east." The woman's expression immediately softened. "Oh, my dear, we've been expecting you. Come in, come in. Preston, you bring in her trunks from the stage office, would you?" The girl looks dead on her feet. Before either could protest, Mrs. Holloway had ushered Zara inside and sent Preston on his errand. The boarding house was clean and smelled of beeswax and fresh baking. Zara was shown to a modest but comfortable room on the second floor. "Your aunt was a dear friend," Mrs. Holloway said as she poured Zara a cup of tea. "When she took ill, she made me promise to look after things until you arrived. The shop's been closed, but I've aired it weekly. Everything's just as she left it." "Thank you for your kindness," Zara replied, sinking gratefully into the chair. "I hope to reopen as soon as possible. I learned millinery from my mother, who learned from Aunt Harriet before she moved west." Mrs. Holloway nodded approvingly. "Good, good. Town needs a proper hat shop. Now about that Preston Drake." Zara felt herself blushing again. "He was kind enough to help me when some men at the saloon were being inappropriate. HMPH. The Shelton brothers and their cousin, no doubt. Troublemakers, the lot of them." Mrs. Holloway's expression grew serious. "Preston's a good man, though some in town might disagree. Keeps to himself mostly. Runs cattle on a small spread outside town, does some hunting and trapping in the winter months. Lost his wife and baby daughter to fever some years back, before he came to these parts." The information made Zara's heart constrict with unexpected sympathy. "That's terrible. Changed him, from what I hear tell. He's fair and honest in his dealings, but there's a hardness to him now. Won't hesitate to use that gun if the cause is just." Mrs. Holloway patted Zara's hand. "Just so you know what kind of man helped you today." A knock at the door interrupted them. Preston stood on the porch, Zara's 2 trunks at his feet. "Stage manager said these belonged to Miss Thomas. Bring them up to the blue room, Preston," Mrs. Holloway instructed. "First door on the right at the top of the stairs." Zara followed him up, watching as he set the heavy trunks at the foot of the iron bedstead with ease. Standing in the small room with him made her acutely aware of his presence, tall and solid, with the scent of leather and open air clinging to him. "Thank you again, Mr. Drake, for everything." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Preston," he reminded her, "and you're welcome, Miss Thomas. Shafter's not all bad men and dusty saloons. Give it time." "Zara," she offered in return, "and I plan to. This is my home now." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or respect. "Well then, Zara Thomas, welcome home." He tipped his hat and turned to leave. "Will I see you again?" The question surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. Preston paused at the doorway. "I expect you will." Small town like this, hard to avoid anyone for long. A slight smile touched his lips. "Besides, my hat could use some attention from a skilled milliner." With that he was gone, his boot steps echoing down the stairs. Zara moved to the small window, watching as he mounted a handsome chestnut horse and rode slowly down the main street, his straight-backed figure gradually disappearing in the golden haze of the late afternoon sun. The next morning dawned clear and hot, typical for late May in Texas. Zara dressed carefully in one of her better dresses, a practical navy blue with white piping, and arranged her hair in a simple but neat style. Today, she would see her aunts shop her shop now for the first time. Mrs. Holloway provided a hearty breakfast and the key to the millinery, along with directions, though they hardly seemed necessary in a town the size of Shafter. "Main Street, between the general store and Finch's photography studio," she said. "Can't miss it. Has Thomas Millinery painted right on the window." The street was already bustling with morning activity as Zara made her way to the shop. Cowboys, ranchers, and townspeople nodded politely as she passed, curiosity evident in their gazes. News traveled fast in small towns, and clearly everyone knew who she was by now. The millinery shop had a cheerful blue door and a large display window currently covered by a lace curtain. A bell tinkled softly as Zara unlocked the door and stepped inside. The familiar scents of felt, silk, and straw greeted her, bringing an unexpected lump to her throat. It smelled like her childhood, when her mother would work on hats in their small apartment above the bookstore in St. Louis. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight streaming through the windows as Zara moved around the space. The front room held display stands and a counter for transactions, while the back room contained workbenches, tools, and shelves lined with supplies, rolls of ribbon, boxes of feathers, bolts of fabric, and hat blocks in various shapes and sizes. She ran her fingers over her aunt's tools, the wooden blocks, the pressing irons, the delicate scissors. Everything was of good quality and well maintained. On a high shelf, she discovered several completed hats covered with cloth to protect them from dust. Each was exquisite, showcasing Harriet Thomas's considerable skill. A knock at the door startled her. Through the glass, she could see a young woman with blonde hair peering inside. Zara hurried to unlock it. "Hello," the woman said, smiling broadly. "I'm Penelope Winslow, the doctor's wife. I saw you opening up and couldn't wait to introduce myself. We've all been wondering when Harriet's niece would arrive." "Zara Thomas," she replied, returning the smile. "Please come in. I'm just getting acquainted with the shop." Penelope stepped inside, her eyes bright with excitement. "It's wonderful to have the millinery open again. Harriet was making me a new summer hat when she fell ill. I've been desperate for something to wear to church socials. I'd be happy to finish it for you if you can describe what you had in mind." "Oh, would you? That would be marvelous." Penelope clapped her hands together. "When do you think you'll officially open?" "I need to take inventory and organize things, but perhaps by the end of the week. I'll need to order some supplies from Dallas or Fort Worth as well." The supply wagon comes through every other Wednesday, Penelope informed her. Mr. Gunderson at the general store can help with orders. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. I saw Preston Drake escort you to Mrs. Holloway's yesterday, quite the talk of the town. Zara felt heat rising to her cheeks. He was kind enough to help me when I had some trouble at the saloon. Penelope's eyes widened. The saloon? My goodness, you have had an adventure. You must join me for tea soon and tell me everything. And don't worry about town gossip, it dies down quickly when something new comes along. She glanced at the clock on the wall. Oh, I must run. I promised Dr. Winslow I'd bring him lunch at the clinic, but I'll be your first customer when you open, I promise. After Penelope left, Zara spent the rest of the morning taking inventory and making lists of supplies she would need. Around midday, her stomach reminded her that breakfast had been hours ago. She locked the shop and headed toward the general store, thinking to purchase something simple for lunch. The store was cool compared to the growing heat outside, its shelves stocked with everything from foodstuffs to tools to yard goods. A gray-haired man with spectacles perched on his nose looked up from behind the counter. Miss Thomas, I presume? Edgar Gunderson, at your service. He extended a weathered hand. Your aunt was a fine lady. We're glad to have another Thomas in Shafter. Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. I'm hoping to reopen the millinery by week's end. Excellent news. The ladies have been making do with ordering hats from catalog or waiting for traveling salesmen, but it's not the same as having a proper milliner. He gestured to the shelves. Anything particular you're looking for today? Just something for a simple lunch, and perhaps you could tell me about placing orders for millinery supplies. As Mr. Gunderson helped her select bread, cheese, and apples, the bell above the door jingled. Zara turned to see Preston Drake enter, his tall frame filling the doorway momentarily before he stepped inside, removing his hat. Their eyes met, and something warm unfurled in Zara's chest at the way his face softened when he saw her. Miss Thomas, he greeted, crossing to where she stood. Settling in all right? Yes, thank you. I've been exploring my aunt's shop this morning. Preston. Good timing, Mr. Gunderson called out. Your order came in on yesterday's wagon. He disappeared into the back room, returning with a wooden crate. Much obliged, Edgar, Preston said, lifting the crate easily. To Zara, he explained. Feed supplements for my cattle. Can't get the regular deliveryman to come all the way out to my place. Mr. Drake has the most beautiful Hereford cattle in the county, Mr. Gunderson told Zara. Started with just a few head, but he's building quite the respectable herd now. Preston looked almost embarrassed at the praise. Still small compared to the big outfits, but they're good stock. His eyes fell on Zara's modest purchases. Having lunch at the shop. That was my plan, yes. The cafe down the street makes a fine stew on Tuesdays. Much better than dry bread and cheese if you're interested in company for lunch. The invitation was offered casually, but Zara noticed how he seemed to hold his breath slightly, waiting for her response. I'd like that, she replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. After paying Mr. Gunderson for her purchases, which she decided to save for later, Zara accompanied Preston to a small cafe near the end of Main Street. Several heads turned as they entered together, and whispered conversations followed them to their table by the window. I'm afraid I'm making you the subject of gossip, Zara said quietly as they settled into their seats. Preston's mouth quirked into a half-smile. Been the subject of worse. Doesn't bother me if it doesn't bother you. A plump waitress with rosy cheeks approached their table. Well, if it isn't Preston Drake actually sitting down for a meal instead of taking it to go, she teased good-naturedly. And with a pretty lady, no less. Miss Thomas, this is Flora Jenkins, maker of the best biscuits in 3 counties, Preston introduced them. Flora, Miss Zara Thomas, Harriet's niece. "Oh, honey, we're so glad you've come to take over the shop," Flora said warmly. "My Lizzie's getting married in September, and she's desperate for a proper bridal hat." "I'd be delighted to help," Zara replied, already mentally designing something suitable for a young bride. They ordered the stew, which arrived steaming hot with fresh biscuits on the side. As they ate, Preston asked about her plans for the shop, listening attentively as she described her ideas for new designs that would blend Eastern fashion with more practical considerations for Western life. "You seem to have given this a lot of thought," he observed. "I've been planning this move for months," Zara admitted. "After my parents died last year, there wasn't much keeping me in St. Louis. When Aunt Harriet wrote suggesting I might want to join her business someday, it seemed like the perfect opportunity for a fresh start." "I'm sorry about your parents," Preston said, his eyes reflecting genuine sympathy. "Losing family is never easy." "Thank you." Zara took a sip of water. "Mrs. Holloway mentioned that you lost your wife and child. I'm sorry for your loss as well." A shadow crossed his face, but he didn't look away. Elizabeth and little Mary. Fever took them both within days of each other. That was 6 years ago now in Kansas. "Is that when you came to Texas?" He nodded. "Couldn't stand to be in the same place without them." "Drifted south, worked cattle drives for a spell, then won a small parcel of land in a poker game just outside Shafter. Been building it up ever since. It sounds like you've made a good life here. Getting there." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Sometimes the right place finds you when you least expect it." The remainder of their lunch passed in comfortable conversation. Preston told her more about Shafter and its residents, which families had been there for generations, which were newcomers like himself, who could be trusted, and who might try to take advantage of a woman in business on her own. "The Shelton brothers, the men from the saloon, they work for Victor Blackwood at the Double B Ranch north of town," he explained. "Blackwood's been buying up small ranches and businesses for years. Your aunt refused to sell to him more than once." Zara frowned. "Why would he want a millinery shop?" "Location, mainly. He wants to expand the saloon next door, turn it into a proper gambling hall. Your aunt's shop and Finch's photography studio are all that stand in his way, and Finch is considering retirement." "Well, I have no intention of selling," Zara said firmly. "This shop is my future now." A look of admiration crossed Preston's face. "You've got spine, Zara Thomas. You'll need it here." After lunch, Preston walked her back to the millinery. At the door, he hesitated. "I'll be heading back to my ranch this afternoon. Probably won't be in town for a few days." "But I meant what I said about needing a new hat." "I'll look forward to your business, Mr. Drake." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Preston," he reminded her softly. "Preston," she echoed, liking the way his name felt on her lips. He tipped his hat and turned to go, then paused. "Zara, be careful around the Shelton brothers. They've got mean streaks, especially when they've been drinking." "I will, thank you." She watched him stride down the street, noticing how other men nodded respectfully as he passed. Whatever his past, Preston Drake had clearly earned a measure of regard in Shafter. Zara found herself hoping it wouldn't be too many days before he returned to town. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity as Zara cleaned, organized, and prepared the shop for reopening. Word spread quickly through town, and several ladies stopped by to introduce themselves and inquire when they might place orders for summer hats. Mrs. Holloway proved an invaluable source of information about potential customers, their tastes, and their ability to pay. Mrs. Eldridge fancies herself quite the fashion plate, but her husband keeps her on a tight allowance, she confided one evening as they shared tea in the boarding house parlor. And young Jenny Mills has her eye on Tobias Fletcher, so she'll want something extra pretty for Sunday church. Zara soaked up these insights, knowing they would help her establish her business more quickly. By Friday, she was ready to open, with a dozen of her aunt's completed hats displayed in the window and several of her own creations in progress. The morning of her grand opening dawned bright and clear. Zara had hung a banner in the window announcing Thomas Millinery now open under new management, and arranged the shop to its best advantage. She wore her finest day dress of forest green that complemented her eyes, and pinned a small hat of her own creation at a jaunty angle atop her dark curls. The bell above the door jingled continuously throughout the morning as ladies from town and surrounding farms came to welcome her and place orders. True to her word, Penelope Winslow was her first customer, commissioning a pale blue confection trimmed with silk flowers for summer socials. By mid-afternoon, Zara had taken measurements for 8 custom hats and sold 3 ready-made ones from her aunt's stock. She was making notes on ribbon orders when the bell rang again. Looking up with a smile, she froze as 3 familiar figures filled the doorway. The Shelton brothers from the saloon. The bearded one removed his hat with exaggerated politeness. "Afternoon, Miss Thomas. Don't believe we were properly introduced the other day. I'm Curtis Shelton. These are my brothers, Emmett and Floyd." Zara straightened her spine, determined not to show fear. "Gentlemen, I'm afraid I don't have much selection in men's hats at present. Perhaps you could return next week," Curtis chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "We ain't here for hats, miss. We're here on behalf of Mr. Blackwood. He'd like to make you an offer for this here property." "I'm not interested in selling." The 3 men exchanged glances. Emmett, the youngest-looking of the trio, stepped forward. "Mr. Blackwood's a generous man. He's willing to pay above market value, seeing as how you just got here and all. As I said, I'm not interested. Now if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." Curtis's friendly facade slipped. "Listen here, lady. Nobody says no to Victor Blackwood. Your aunt learned that the hard way." A chill ran down Zara's spine. "What do you mean by that?" "Just saying, it's mighty unfortunate how quick she took ill after refusing his last offer." Curtis leaned forward, placing his hands on the counter. "Would be a shame if something similar happened to her pretty niece." The bell jingled again as the door opened. Relief flooded through Zara as Sheriff Wilkins stepped inside, his badge glinting in the afternoon light. "Problem here, Miss Thomas?" he asked, his hand resting casually near his holstered gun. Curtis straightened immediately. "No problem, Sheriff. Just welcoming the new business owner to town." "Uh-huh." The sheriff's skeptical gaze moved between the brothers and Zara. "You boys have business here, or are you just taking up the lady's valuable time?" "We were just leaving," Curtis said, jamming his hat back on his head. To Zara, he added quietly, "Think about what I said. Mr. Blackwood don't like to be kept waiting." After they left, Sheriff Wilkins approached the counter. "Those boys giving you trouble?" Zara hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "They said they were here on behalf of Mr. Blackwood, wanting to buy my shop. When I refused, they implied that my aunt's illness might not have been natural." The sheriff's weathered face grew serious. "Your aunt took sick with pneumonia. Dr. Winslow attended her himself." "Nothing suspicious about it." He sighed heavily. "But Blackwood's been trying to expand his holdings in town for years. He can get persistent, threatening, you mean?" "I didn't hear no direct threats," the sheriff said carefully, "but I'll have a word with Blackwood about his messengers. In the meantime, you might want to be extra careful, Miss Thomas. Lock your doors at night, don't walk alone after dark, that sort of thing." "Thank you, Sheriff." After he left, Zara found her hands were trembling slightly. The Shelton brothers' visit had cast a shadow over her otherwise successful opening day. She tried to focus on finishing her notes for supply orders, but her mind kept returning to their veiled threats and the implication about her aunt's death. When the shop closed at 5 o'clock, Zara locked up carefully and made her way back to the boarding house, acutely aware of every movement and sound on the street around her. Mrs. Holloway greeted her with enthusiasm, eager to hear about her first day, but Zara found herself holding back the details of the Sheltons' visit, not wanting to worry her landlady. That night, she lay awake long after the house had gone quiet, staring at the moonlight patterns on her ceiling. She had come to Shafter seeking a fresh start, a place to belong, a chance to build something meaningful. She wasn't about to let Victor Blackwood or his thugs intimidate her out of her inheritance. As she finally drifted toward sleep, Zara found herself wishing Preston Drake would return to town soon. There was something about his steady presence that made her feel safer, more confident. Foolish, she murmured to herself. She'd known the man less than a week. Yet she couldn't deny the connection she'd felt, the way her pulse quickened when their eyes met. Morning brought renewed determination. After breakfast, Zara headed to the shop, ready for her second day of business. The streets were quieter than the previous day, it being Saturday, when many of the ranch hands and farmers came to town for supplies and entertainment. The morning passed without incident, with several customers stopping in to browse or inquire about custom orders. Around noon, Zara decided to take advantage of the lull to begin work on Penelope Winslow's hat. She had just selected the perfect blue ribbon to complement the silk flowers when the bell above the door jingled. Her welcoming smile froze as Victor Blackwood himself stepped into the shop. She recognized him immediately from descriptions around town, tall and broad-shouldered, expensively dressed, with silver-streaked dark hair and cold eyes that assessed everything as if calculating its value. "Miss Thomas," he said, removing his hat with a flourish. "Victor Blackwood." "A pleasure to finally meet you." Zara inclined her head slightly. "Mr. Blackwood, I understand my associates called on you yesterday. I hope they conveyed my interest in your property." "They did, and I believe I made my position clear. The shop is not for sale." Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps they failed to adequately express the generosity of my offer. I'm prepared to pay you $3,000 more than double what this building and business are worth." Despite herself, Zara was momentarily taken aback by the sum. It was indeed generous enough to establish herself comfortably elsewhere. But something in Blackwood's confident manner, the way he simply assumed he could buy whatever he wanted, strengthened her resolve. "The price is irrelevant, Mr. Blackwood. This shop was my aunt's legacy to me, and I intend to honor that by continuing her business." Blackwood's pleasant expression hardened slightly. "A noble sentiment, Miss Thomas, but perhaps impractical. A young woman alone in a frontier town. Life can be unpredictable. Accidents happen. Businesses fail." The threat was thinly veiled, but before Zara could respond, the bell jingled again. Preston Drake stepped inside, his tall frame casting a shadow across the floor. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Blackwood. "Victor," he said coolly. "Didn't expect to find you in a millinery shop." "Drake," Blackwood's mouth tightened. "I was just discussing business with Miss Thomas." "Is that so?" Preston moved to stand beside Zara, his presence reassuring. "And how's business, Miss Thomas?" Zara lifted her chin. "Excellent, thank you. Though Mr. Blackwood seems to think I'd be better off selling to him." "Blackwood thinks everyone's better off selling to him," Preston remarked. "Hasn't quite learned to take no for an answer." Tension crackled between the two men as they regarded each other with barely concealed hostility. Finally, Blackwood replaced his hat. "Consider my offer, Miss Thomas. It won't remain open indefinitely." With a curt nod to Preston, he strode out of the shop. As soon as the door closed behind him, Zara released a shaky breath. "Thank you for arriving when you did." Preston's expression remained grim. "Was he threatening you?" "Not directly, but the implication was clear enough." She hesitated. "His men, the Sheltons, they suggested yesterday that my aunt's illness might have been helped along because she refused to sell." Anger flashed in Preston's eyes. "That's a damned lie. Your aunt was respected in this town. If there'd been any suspicion about her death, half of Shafter would have been calling for Blackwood's head." His voice softened. "But that doesn't mean he won't try to pressure you in other ways." "I won't be intimidated," Zara insisted, though her voice wasn't entirely steady. Preston studied her for a moment, then nodded approvingly. "Good. But being brave doesn't mean being reckless. Blackwood's dangerous when he doesn't get his way. The sheriff suggested I take precautions." "Wilkins is right about that much, at least." Preston glanced around the shop. "You working here alone all day?" "For now. Eventually I hope to hire an assistant, but I need to establish the business first." "Might be wise to have someone with you, at least until Blackwood gets the message that you're not selling." Zara's lips curved into a small smile. "Are you volunteering, Mr. Drake?" The question seemed to catch him off guard, and a faint flush colored his tan cheeks. "I'm heading back to my ranch this afternoon. Got cattle that need tending." He hesitated. "But I could ride into town more often for the next few weeks, make my presence known." "I'd appreciate that," Zara said softly, "though I wouldn't want to disrupt your work." "Need to come to town for supplies anyway," he replied with a shrug, as if it were nothing. But something in his eyes told her it was far from nothing. After a moment, he added, "Actually came in today to see about that hat I mentioned." Grateful for the change of subject, Zara moved into familiar territory. "Of course. What did you have in mind?" "Nothing fancy. Just a good working hat for sun and rain. Current one's seen better days." He removed his hat, revealing a battered brown Stetson with a sweat-stained band. Zara took it from him, their fingers brushing momentarily in the exchange. "I could clean and reshape this one, replace the band, or we could start fresh with a new one. Whatever you recommend." She led him to a display of men's hats in various styles. "For ranch work, you'll want something durable but not too heavy. Good brim for sun protection." She selected a chocolate brown hat with a simple band. "Try this one." Preston obligingly removed his hat and tried on the one she offered. The rich color complemented his sun-darkened skin and brought out amber highlights in his hazel eyes. Zara found herself noticing the strong line of his jaw, the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of squinting against sun and wind. "How does it feel?" she asked, her voice coming out slightly breathier than intended. "Good," he said, adjusting it slightly. "Comfortable." "It suits you," she said honestly, "better than your old one." A smile touched his lips. "Sold then. How much do I owe you?" $3 for the hat, and I'll throw in a new band for your old one so you'll have a spare." "That's more than fair." He reached into his pocket and counted out the money. "When should I come back for the old one?" "Tuesday. I should have it ready by then." "Tuesday it is." He settled his new hat on his head and gathered up the old one. "I'll see you then, Zara. Be careful in the meantime." After he left, Zara found herself touching the counter where his hands had rested, replaying their conversation in her mind. Despite the unsettling visit from Blackwood, she felt a warm glow of anticipation at the thought of seeing Preston again on Tuesday. Sunday brought a brief respite from business concerns, as Zara attended church with Mrs. Holloway. The small white clapboard building was filled to capacity, with families from town and surrounding ranches gathered in their Sunday best. Pastor Miller, A kindly man with a booming voice welcomed her publicly, causing Zara to blush as all heads turned in her direction. After the service, she was surrounded by well-wishers and potential customers, all curious about the newcomer who had taken over Harriet Thomas's shop. Among them was Mary Finch, the photographer's daughter, who quickly established herself as a potential friend. "Papa says Mr. Blackwood visited you yesterday," Mary said as they stood in the churchyard. "He tried to buy our studio last month, offered an absurd amount. Papa almost considered it, but photography's his life. He couldn't bear to give it up." "That's exactly how I feel about the millinery," Zara confided. "It's not just a building or a business. It's a connection to my aunt, to my mother who taught me the trade." Mary nodded understandingly. "Blackwood doesn't see it that way. To him, everything has a price." She lowered her voice. "Be careful, Zara. He doesn't take rejection well. Last year, the Johnson family refused to sell their small ranch to him. 2 weeks later, their barn mysteriously caught fire. You think he was responsible. Everyone thinks it, but no one can prove it. That's how Blackwood operates. Nothing can ever be traced directly back to him." The conversation left Zara unsettled, but she was determined not to let fear dictate her decisions. Monday brought a steady stream of customers to the shop, keeping her too busy to dwell on worries about Blackwood. By closing time, she had orders for 5 more custom hats and had sold several ready-made ones. As promised, she spent the evening working on Preston's old hat, carefully cleaning and reshaping it, replacing the sweat-stained band with fresh leather. The work was soothing, and she found herself wondering what he might be doing at his ranch at that moment, tending cattle under the vast Texas sky, perhaps, or sitting by a fire in a solitary cabin. Tuesday morning, Zara woke early, an inexplicable excitement bubbling within her at the prospect of Preston's visit. She chose a pretty blue dress with white lace at the collar and arranged her hair with extra care, then immediately felt foolish for doing so. "He's a customer, nothing more," she told her reflection sternly. But the flutter in her stomach when she thought of him suggested otherwise. The morning passed without Preston's appearance, each jingle of the bell bringing a moment of anticipation followed by disappointment. By mid-afternoon, Zara had resigned herself to the possibility that he wouldn't come at all. Perhaps ranch work had detained him, or he had simply forgotten. She was helping an elderly lady select ribbon for a bonnet when the bell jingled again. Looking up, she saw Preston standing in the doorway, hat in hand, his clothes dustier than usual as if he'd ridden hard to get there. "Miss Thomas," he greeted her formally, nodding to her customer as well. "Mrs. Lawson." "Mr. Drake," the elderly lady replied with a knowing smile. "Good to see you in town. How's that ranch of yours coming along?" "Growing steadily, madam. Thank you for asking." As they exchanged pleasantries, Zara busied herself with wrapping Mrs. Lawson's purchases, trying to calm her suddenly racing heart. When the older woman finally left, promising to return for her finished bonnet the following week, Zara and Preston were alone in the shop. "I have your hat ready," she said, retrieving it from beneath the counter. The old Stetson looked remarkably improved, restored to something close to its original shape with a fresh band giving it new life. Preston took it from her, turning it in his hands appreciatively. "Fine work, Miss Thomas. Looks better than when I first bought it. I'm glad you're pleased." She hesitated, then asked, "How are things at your ranch?" "Busy. Had a heifer calving yesterday, difficult birth. Kept me up most of the night, but mother and calf are doing fine now." His eyes met hers. "Sorry I couldn't get here earlier." "There's no need to apologize. I understand ranch work doesn't follow a schedule." He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "That it doesn't." After a moment, he asked, "Any more trouble from Blackwood or the Sheltons?" "No, thankfully, it's been quiet." "Good. He seemed to hesitate, as if weighing his next words carefully. "Zara, there's a social at the church this Saturday evening. Dancing, food, that sort of thing. I was wondering if you'd care to attend. With me." The invitation caught her by surprise, though she realized she had been hoping for something of the sort. "I'd like that very much," she replied, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. His face relaxed into a genuine smile that transformed his features, making him look younger, less weathered by sun and hardship. "I'll call for you at the boarding house around 6, if that suits." "It suits perfectly." They stood looking at each other for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Finally, Preston cleared his throat. "Well, I should be getting back. Got fences that need mending before dark. Of course." At the door, he paused. "Zara, I'm glad you came to Shafter." Before she could respond, he was gone, the bell jingling in his wake. Zara pressed her hands to her warm cheeks, feeling like a schoolgirl with her first beau rather than a grown woman of 22. But there was no denying the effect Preston Drake had on her. The way her pulse quickened in his presence, the sense of connection she felt despite their brief acquaintance. The rest of the week passed in a blur of anticipation mixed with busy days at the shop. Word spread quickly about her skill with hats, bringing customers from as far as 20 miles away. By Friday, she had enough orders to keep her busy for weeks, a reassuring sign that her business would prosper. Saturday evening arrived at last. Zara dressed with particular care in her finest gown, a deep rose color with delicate embroidery at the bodice and hem. She pinned her dark hair up in an elegant style, allowing a few curls to frame her face, and added her mother's pearl earrings, one of the few pieces of jewelry she owned. Mrs. Holloway appeared in her doorway just as she was finishing her preparations. "My, don't you look lovely," the older woman said approvingly. "Preston Drake won't know what hit him." Zara blushed. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to anyone with eyes, dear." Mrs. Holloway smiled kindly. "It's good to see Preston taking an interest in someone again. After Elizabeth died, many thought he'd never look at another woman. He's carried that grief for a long time." "I wouldn't want to be a replacement for someone he's lost," Zara said softly. "Oh, child, that's not what I meant at all. Each love is its own thing, not a replacement for what came before. Preston's heart has been closed up for years. The fact that he's opening it again, even a little, speaks volumes about how he must feel about you." Before Zara could respond, there was a knock at the front door downstairs. Mrs. Holloway's eyes twinkled. Right on time, a good sign in a man. Zara took a deep breath and made her way downstairs. Preston stood in the foyer, hat in hand, dressed in what was clearly his best clothing, a clean white shirt, dark waistcoat, and trousers that, while not new, had been carefully pressed. His hair was neatly combed and he'd trimmed his beard. But what struck Zara most was the look in his eyes as she descended the stairs, a mixture of admiration, delight, and something deeper that made her heart skip. "You look beautiful," he said simply when she reached him. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." Mrs. Holloway watched their exchange with unconcealed pleasure. "Now you two run along and enjoy yourselves. But not too late, mind. Even on Saturday, I lock the doors at 11. The church social was already in full swing when they arrived. Lanterns hung from trees surrounding the churchyard, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Tables laden with food lined one side of the yard, while at the other end, a small group of musicians played lively tunes on fiddle, guitar, and banjo. Couples whirled in a cleared space between, laughing and talking. Penelope Winslow spotted them immediately and hurried over. "Zara, I'm so glad you came, and with Preston, how wonderful." She winked at Zara before turning to Preston. "You've chosen the prettiest girl in Shafter as your partner, Mr. Drake." Preston's hand settled lightly at the small of Zara's back. Can't argue with that. Penelope's husband joined them, a tall man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Preston, good to see you in town for something besides medical emergencies, he said, shaking hands warmly. Doc, Preston acknowledged. Miss Thomas has been good enough to accompany me this evening. Lucky man, the doctor said with a smile for Zara. My wife tells me you're quite the artist with hats, Miss Thomas. She hasn't stopped talking about the one you're making her. The conversation flowed easily as more townspeople came to greet them. Zara was struck by how naturally Preston introduced her to everyone, the simple pride in his voice when he presented her as Miss Zara Thomas, our new milliner. There was something possessive in the way he kept her close, his hand never straying far from her elbow or the small of her back. As the evening progressed, they danced several times a Virginia reel that left them both laughing and breathless, followed by a waltz during which Preston held her with careful respect, though close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. He moved with surprising grace for a man who spent his days on horseback, guiding her confidently through the steps. During a break in the dancing, they visited the refreshment table for cups of punch and slices of Mrs. Jenkins's famous apple pie. Preston led her to a quiet spot beneath a large oak tree at the edge of the churchyard, away from the press of the crowd. Are you enjoying yourself? He asked, his voice low. Very much. Everyone has been so welcoming. Zara took a sip of punch. You seem to be well respected in town. He shrugged slightly. Took time. When I first arrived, folks were wary another drifter passing through, but a man's judged by his actions out here. Do right by people, keep your word, pull your weight when trouble comes. Eventually you're accepted. And Blackwood, where does he fit in? Preston's expression darkened. Blackwood's different. He came with money, bought the biggest ranch in the county right off. Hires men to do his dirty work while he plays the respectable businessman. Some folks are afraid of him. Others are happy to look the other way as long as his money flows into town. He paused. But he doesn't have as many friends as he thinks. When push comes to shove, most folks around here value fairness over fancy talk. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of raucous laughter from the edge of the gathering. Looking over, Zara saw the Shelton brothers, obviously drunk, pushing their way through the crowd toward the refreshment table. Preston tensed beside her. Trouble, he murmured. They don't usually show their faces at church events. Sheriff Wilkins appeared, moving to intercept the brothers before they could reach the food. Words were exchanged, too distant to hear, but the body language was clear, the sheriff ordering them to leave, the Sheltons arguing belligerently. Maybe I should go help Wilkins, Preston said, setting down his plate. Before he could move, Curtis Shelton's voice rose above the music and conversation. Where's that milliner woman? Got a message for her from Mr. Blackwood. A hush fell over the gathering as all eyes turned toward Zara. Preston stepped slightly in front of her, shielding her with his body. Stay here, he instructed quietly. No, Zara said firmly, placing her hand on his arm. I won't hide. Whatever message Blackwood has, I'd rather hear it directly. Concern flashed in Preston's eyes, but after a moment he nodded. All right, but I'm coming with you. Together they approached the Sheltons, who stood swaying slightly, whiskey fumes emanating from them. Sheriff Wilkins looked relieved to see Preston, though he frowned at Zara's presence. Miss Thomas, Curtis slurred, attempting a mocking bow. Mr. Blackwood wanted us to remind you that his offer expires tomorrow. After that, well, he grinned nastily. Things might get uncomfortable for a lady running a business alone. Is that a threat, Shelton? Preston's voice was dangerously quiet. Just passing along a message, Curtis replied, his grin widening. Though I gotta say, if she keeps refusing, Mr. Blackwood might let us. Convince her in our own way." His gaze slid over Zara in a manner that made her skin crawl. "Might be fun." Before anyone could react, Preston's fist connected with Curtis's jaw, sending the larger man stumbling backward. "You talk to or about Miss Thomas like that again, and I'll kill you," Preston said evenly. Curtis recovered his balance, rage contorting his features. "You'll regret that, Drake," he snarled, lunging forward. What followed was brief but violent. Curtis threw wild punches that Preston mostly avoided, responding with calculated blows that quickly had the larger man on the ground. When Emmett and Floyd moved to join the fight, Sheriff Wilkins and Dr. Winslow stepped in, restraining them. "That's enough," the sheriff barked. "Sheltons, you're done here. Get back to your boss and tell him if he has messages to deliver, he can come do it himself like a man, not send drunk lackeys to a church social." Curtis spat blood onto the ground as he struggled to his feet. "This ain't over," he growled, glaring at Preston. "Not by a long shot." The brothers slouched off into the darkness, leaving behind a murmuring crowd. Preston turned to Zara, his right hand already beginning to swell. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she assured him, though her heart was racing. "But your hand, nothing broken," Dr. Winslow said, examining Preston's knuckles. "Ice it when you get home. It'll be sore for a few days." The social gradually resumed, though the mood had sobered considerably. Several people approached Zara to express support, assuring her that Blackwood and his men didn't speak for the town. But the evening's carefree atmosphere had been irreparably damaged. "I should get you back to Mrs. Holloway's," Preston said after a while, his expression troubled. They walked in silence through the darkened streets, Preston's eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. When they reached the boarding house, he hesitated on the porch. "I'm sorry about tonight," he said. "You shouldn't have had to face that kind of ugliness." "You have nothing to apologize for," Zara replied. "If anything, I should thank you for defending me." Preston's gaze dropped to his bruised hand, then lifted to meet her eyes. "Zara, I think it might be best if I stay in town tonight. The Sheltons won't take that humiliation lightly. They might try something." The implication sent a chill down her spine. "You think they'd come after me? I don't know, but I'd rather not take chances." He glanced toward the street. "I could take a room here for the night or sleep at the livery with my horse if Mrs. Holloway has no space." "I'll speak to her," Zara said. "I'm sure she'll understand." Mrs. Holloway did indeed understand and was more than willing to rent Preston a small room at the end of the hallway. "Better safe than sorry," she declared as she prepared the room. "Those Shelton boys are mean as snakes when they're crossed." Later, as Zara prepared for bed, she found herself pausing at her window, looking out at the quiet street below. Somewhere out there, Victor Blackwood was plotting his next move, determined to acquire her property by any means necessary. The thought should have terrified her, but strangely she felt more angry than afraid. This shop, this town, was to be her new beginning. She'd come too far and lost too much to be bullied out of her inheritance now. And she was no longer alone, she realized. In just over a week, she'd found allies in Shafter, Mrs. Holloway, Mary Finch, Penelope Winslow, Sheriff Wilkins, and Preston Drake, whose steady presence had already come to mean more to her than she could have imagined. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Opening it, she found Preston standing in the hallway, his expression grave. "Sorry to disturb you," he said quietly. "Just wanted to make sure you're all right." "I am," she assured him. "Though I keep thinking about what happens tomorrow when Blackwood's offer expires." Preston's jaw tightened. "I've been thinking about that too. I don't want to alarm you, but it might be wise not to open the shop tomorrow. Sunday's supposed to be a day of rest anyway." "And Monday? What then?" "I can't hide forever, Preston." "No, you can't." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've got some cattle business to attend to at my ranch, but I'll be back by Monday morning. I'll escort you to the shop and make sure you're safe." "You can't stand guard over me indefinitely," Zara pointed out gently. "I know that. But maybe seeing that you have support will make Blackwood think twice." He hesitated. "There's another option. You could sell the shop, use the money to start fresh somewhere else, away from Blackwood's influence." Zara shook her head firmly. "This is my home now. I won't be driven away by threats." A smile touched Preston's lips, though his eyes remained worried. "You're one of the bravest women I've ever met, Zara Thomas." "Not brave," she corrected. "Just stubborn." "Either way," he said softly, "I admire it." He reached out tentatively, his fingertips just brushing her cheek in the gentlest of caresses. "Get some rest. Whatever tomorrow brings, we'll face it together." The simple promise, quietly spoken in the dimly lit hallway, warmed Zara to her core. As Preston bid her good night and returned to his room, she closed her door feeling strangely at peace despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. Whatever Blackwood had planned, she would not face it alone. Sunday passed quietly, with Zara attending church alongside Mrs. Holloway and Preston. There was no sign of Blackwood or the Sheltons, though their absence seemed more ominous than reassuring. After the service, Preston rode out to his ranch to attend to necessary work, promising to return by nightfall. True to his word, he appeared at the boarding house just after sunset, looking tired but determined. They spent the evening in Mrs. Holloway's parlor with several other boarders, the conversation carefully avoiding any mention of Blackwood or the previous night's confrontation. As they prepared to say good night, Preston took Zara's hand. "I'll walk you to the shop in the morning," he said. "Meet you for breakfast at 7. "That would be lovely," she replied, hoping her voice didn't betray the flutter his touch had sent through her. Morning came bright and clear, with no hint of the tension that hung over Zara as she dressed for the day. She chose a practical gray dress with a high collar, pinning her hair in a no-nonsense style. Whatever Blackwood had planned, she would meet it with dignity. Preston was waiting in the boarding house dining room, freshly shaved and wearing clean clothes, though his bruised knuckles remained a visible reminder of Saturday night's altercation. They ate breakfast quickly, Mrs. Holloway packing extra biscuits for them, in case it's a busy morning and you can't get away for lunch. The walk to the millinery was uneventful, the town just beginning to stir as shopkeepers opened their businesses and ranch hands, who had spent the night in town nursed hangovers with strong coffee at the cafe. A few people called greetings as they passed, but Zara noticed an undercurrent of tension in some of the exchanges' worried glances, conversations that hushed as they approached. Word had clearly spread about Blackwood's ultimatum and the Sheltons' behavior at the social. Shafter was holding its collective breath, waiting to see what would happen next. When they reached the shop, Preston insisted on entering first, checking each room carefully before allowing Zara to follow. Nothing seemed amiss. The front room was exactly as she had left it on Saturday, hats displayed on stands, ribbons and trimmings arranged neatly on shelves. "Looks peaceful enough," Preston said, though he didn't appear entirely convinced. "I'll stay with you for a while if that's all right." "Of course," Zara replied, grateful for his presence as she unlocked the front door and turned the sign to open. The morning passed slowly. Few customers came in, though several townspeople found excuses to walk past the shop, peering through the window as if checking that all was well. Around 10 o'clock, Sheriff Wilkins stopped by, ostensibly to order a new hat band but clearly more interested in assessing the situation. "No sign of Blackwood or his boys," he reported quietly to Preston while Zara helped a customer. "But they rode into town early this morning." They're holed up at the saloon for now." Preston's expression darkened. "Drinking already? That doesn't bode well." "Got deputies keeping an eye on them," the sheriff assured him. "First sign of trouble, we'll step in." As the sheriff left, Zara approached Preston. "What did he say?" Preston considered sugarcoating the truth, but something in her steady gaze told him she deserved honesty. "The Sheltons are in town, drinking at the saloon. Sheriff's keeping watch." Zara nodded, absorbing this information calmly. So we wait," he agreed, impressed by her composure. The clock had just struck noon when the door opened, bringing not customers but Victor Blackwood himself, flanked by Curtis and Emmett Shelton. All three men looked sober and purposeful, Blackwood impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, the Sheltons cleaned up but still rough around the edges. Curtis's face bore the bruises from his encounter with Preston's fists, his eyes cold with remembered humiliation. Preston straightened from where he'd been leaning against the counter, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun. Zara touched his arm gently, a silent request for restraint, then stepped forward to face the newcomers. "Mr. Blackwood," she greeted him, her voice steady. "I believe I made my position clear on Saturday. The shop is not for sale." Blackwood's smile was tight. "Indeed you did, Miss Thomas. But I thought perhaps, given time to reflect, you might have reconsidered." His gaze shifted to Preston. "Especially considering the complications that might arise from your continued refusal." "Are you threatening Miss Thomas?" Preston's voice was dangerously quiet. "Not at all," Blackwood replied smoothly. "Merely pointing out that business ventures are risky, particularly for newcomers. Shafter can be an unpredictable place. Fires, thefts, accidents. They happen with unfortunate regularity." "Sounds like a threat to me," Preston said, taking a step forward. Curtis Shelton moved his hand toward his gun, but Blackwood stopped him with a gesture. Now, we're all civilized people here." To Zara, he added, "My offer remains open until sundown, Miss Thomas. $5,000 my final price. After that." He spread his hands in a gesture of regret. "Well, as I said, Shafter can be unpredictable." The bell above the door jingled again as Mary Finch entered the shop, stopping short at the tableau before her. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not interrupting anything," Zara said quickly. "Mr. Blackwood was just leaving." Mary's eyes widened as she recognized the visitors. "I can come back later." "No need," Blackwood said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "As Miss Thomas says, we were just leaving." To Zara, he added quietly, "Sundown, Miss Thomas. Think carefully about your decision." After they departed, Mary rushed to Zara's side. "Are you all right? What did they want?" Preston answered for her. "Blackwood, still trying to buy the shop, set a deadline of sundown today." "And then what?" Mary asked, her face pale. "And then, presumably, he moves from threats to action," Preston said grimly. Mary looked between them, her expression resolute. "Well, he won't find it easy. Half the town is talking about how he's trying to bully you, Zara. Papa says it's high time someone stood up to him." "Your father's right," Preston agreed, "but standing up to Blackwood could get dangerous." The rest of the day passed in a state of tense anticipation. Word spread quickly about Blackwood's visit and deadline. One by one, townspeople found reasons to stop by the millinery to place orders, make purchases, or simply express support. By mid-afternoon, Zara had more business than she could handle, with Preston and Mary helping customers while she worked frantically to complete orders. "It's like they're trying to show Blackwood they support you," Mary observed as she wrapped a purchase for Mrs. Eldridge, who had splurged on an extravagant hat she clearly didn't need. "I'm overwhelmed," Zara admitted, touched by the town's response. "I never expected such kindness from people who barely know me." As the day wore on, Preston grew increasingly vigilant, checking the street frequently and insisting on escorting female customers back to the main street when they left. Sheriff Wilkins stopped by again mid-afternoon, reporting that Blackwood had returned to his ranch, but the Shelton brothers remained in town, drinking steadily at the saloon. "I've got deputies watching them," he assured Zara and Preston. "But maybe you should close up early today, Miss Thomas." "Just to be safe." Zara hesitated, torn between prudence and principle. "If I close early, aren't I letting Blackwood win, showing that his intimidation works?" The sheriff and Preston exchanged glances. "There's a difference between courage and foolhardiness," Preston said gently. "Closing an hour early one day isn't surrender." In the end, Zara agreed to close at 4 instead of 5. She and Mary spent the final hour organizing the day's purchases and orders while Preston kept watch by the window. By the time the clock struck 4, the street outside had grown unusually quiet, as if the town were holding its breath. "I'll walk you ladies back to your homes," Preston said as they prepared to leave. "Mary first, then Zara to the boarding house." They had just stepped onto the boardwalk when the sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet afternoon. Turning, they saw flames erupting in the back room of the millinery, visible through the shop's front window. "Fire!" Mary screamed as Preston pushed both women behind him. "Get to the general store and raise the alarm," he ordered Mary, who immediately ran to comply. To Zara, he said urgently, "Stay here. Don't move." Before she could protest, he had rushed back into the burning shop. Seconds stretched into agonizing minutes as Zara stood frozen on the boardwalk, watching smoke begin to billow from the windows. Around her, shouts of "Fire!" echoed down the street as the town's alarm spread. Men came running from all directions, forming a bucket brigade from the town's well to the millinery. Sheriff Wilkins appeared, organizing the efforts, sending boys running to fetch more buckets. "Where's Preston?" the sheriff asked when he spotted Zara. "Inside," she choked out, terror gripping her heart. "He went in when it first started." As if summoned by her words, Preston emerged from the smoke-filled doorway, coughing violently, his clothes singed. In his arms, he carried several of her aunt's prized possessions: the specialized hat blocks, the imported scissors, the ledger containing all customer orders. "Back room's worst," he gasped, setting the items on the boardwalk. Someone threw a torch through the window. Sheriff Wilkins's face hardened. "Sheltons," he spat. "They're the only ones who dare." The bucket brigade worked frantically as the fire spread from the back room to the main shop. Zara watched in horrified fascination as her dreams literally went up in smoke. The beautiful hats, the carefully selected ribbons and trimmings, the furniture her aunt had chosen, all consumed by hungry flames. Preston stayed by her side, an arm around her shoulders as she trembled with shock and anger. "I'm so sorry, Zara," he murmured. "We'll rebuild. I promise you that." It took over an hour for the fire to be extinguished. By then, little remained of Thomas Millinery but charred timbers and smoke-blackened walls. The front room had been partially saved, but the back workroom, the heart of the business, was destroyed. As twilight fell, casting long shadows across the ruined shop, Victor Blackwood rode into town. He reined his horse to a stop across the street from the millinery, surveying the damage with an expression of practiced concern. "Miss Thomas," he called, dismounting and crossing to where she stood with Preston and the sheriff. "What a terrible tragedy. If there's anything I can do to help—" "You've done enough," Preston growled, stepping forward menacingly. Sheriff Wilkins placed a restraining hand on Preston's arm. "Now's not the time for accusations without proof, Drake." "Proof?" Preston's voice rose in disbelief. "The fire starts minutes after sundown, Blackwood's deadline, and you want proof?" Blackwood spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. I was at my ranch all afternoon, Sheriff. Ask any of my men. As for the Shelton brothers, well, they work for me, but I can hardly be held responsible for actions they might take on their own initiative. Convenient, Preston said bitterly. Mr. Blackwood, Zara said, finding her voice at last. Her tone was calm, belying the turmoil within. I want to make something very clear. This shop was my aunt's legacy to me, and now it's nothing but ashes. But know this, I will rebuild. And I will never, ever sell to you, not if you offered every dollar in Texas. A muscle twitched in Blackwood's jaw, the only sign that her words had affected him. "An admirable sentiment, Miss Thomas, but rebuilding takes money I suspect you don't have. My offer still stands. $5,000 for the property as is." The lady said no, Preston interjected. "I suggest you leave now before I forget the sheriff's present." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, Drake. Both of you are, but I'm a patient man. When you change your mind, Miss Thomas, you know where to find me." With a tip of his hat, he remounted his horse and rode away. As darkness fell, Mrs. Holloway arrived to escort a shell-shocked Zara back to the boarding house. "You'll stay with us as long as you need, dear," she assured her. "We take care of our own in Shafter." Preston walked alongside them, his expression grim. At the boarding house door, he took Zara's hands in his. "Try to rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do next." "What is there to do?" Zara asked, the full weight of her loss finally hitting her. "Everything's gone, Preston. My aunt's shop, my livelihood, my new beginning." "Not everything," he said firmly. "You're still here, and you're not alone." He hesitated, then added quietly, "I have some savings. Not a fortune, but enough to start rebuilding." Zara stared at him in disbelief. "Preston, no, I couldn't possibly accept not offering charity," he interrupted. "Call it an investment in a business partner if you like. Or—" he paused, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. "Or call it what it really is, a man helping the woman he cares about." The simple declaration, spoken in the gathering darkness of the boarding house porch, stole Zara's breath. "Preston," she whispered, unable to find words. He squeezed her hands gently. "You don't need to say anything now, just know the offer stands. Whatever you decide about the shop, about Shafter, about us, I'm here." With that, he released her hands and stepped back. "Get some sleep, Zara. Things will look different in the morning." As she watched him walk away, his shoulders squared against the weight of the day's events, Zara felt something stir within her, not just gratitude or affection, but something deeper, more profound. In the midst of destruction, something new was being born. Morning brought a renewed sense of purpose. Zara woke early, dressed simply, and made her way to the burned-out shell of her shop before most of the town was stirring. Standing amid the charred timbers and water-logged debris, she took stock of what remained. The front wall and part of the display area had survived, though smoke damaged. The safe containing her modest funds and important papers had withstood the fire, protected by its iron construction. Everything else, the inventory, tools, supplies, the carefully crafted hats representing weeks of work, was gone. And yet, surveying the damage in the clear light of day, Zara felt not despair but determination. "Thought I might find you here," Preston's voice came from behind her. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept much, but his eyes were clear and focused. "I needed to see it," Zara explained, "to understand what I'm facing." Preston nodded, understanding. And I'm going to rebuild," she said firmly. "Somehow." A slow smile spread across his face. "That's what I hoped you'd say." He gestured to a wagon pulling up outside, driven by a young man Zara recognized as one of the hands from Preston's ranch. "I took the liberty of bringing some tools and lumber to secure what's left, keep it safe until proper rebuilding can start." Tears pricked Zara's eyes at his thoughtfulness. "Thank you." They worked together through the morning, salvaging what could be saved, clearing debris, boarding up windows to protect against weather or further vandalism. Around mid-morning, Mary Finch arrived with her father, bringing coffee and biscuits. "Papa wants to help," she announced. "He says his studio needs a neighboring business to keep Blackwood at bay." More townspeople arrived as the day progressed, offering assistance, materials, even temporary space for Zara to work while rebuilding took place. By noon, what had started as a simple cleanup had evolved into a community effort, with men hauling away charred timber and women organizing salvaged items. Sheriff Wilkins appeared just after midday, his expression grim but satisfied. "Found the Shelton brothers passed out at their camp outside town," he reported to Preston and Zara. "Had empty kerosene bottles with them, and Curtis's boots have burn marks and smell of lamp oil. They're in my jail now." "Will the charges stick?" Preston asked. The sheriff shrugged. "Hard to say. Blackwood will hire lawyers from Fort Worth, claim it was drunken foolishness, not deliberate arson, but I can hold them for a while at least." He nodded toward the community effort underway. "Looks like you've got plenty of support here." "More than I ever expected," Zara admitted, watching as Mr. Gunderson from the general store directed a group of men unloading lumber from his wagon. "Folks around here have been waiting for someone to stand up to Blackwood," the sheriff explained. "Your aunt started it by refusing to sell. You're finishing what she began." As the day wore on, Zara found herself overwhelmed by the town's generosity. Mrs. Jenkins from the cafe brought food for the workers. Penelope Winslow organized a group of women to clean and press the few hats and materials that had been saved from the front of the store. Even Pastor Miller arrived to offer both practical help and spiritual encouragement. By late afternoon, the site had been cleared, temporary repairs made to the remaining structure, and plans drawn up for rebuilding. Mr. Finch, who had experience in construction before becoming a photographer, offered to oversee the project. Several ranchers pledged lumber from their own land. Mr. Gunderson extended credit for building supplies. Throughout it all, Preston remained by Zara's side, offering quiet support and practical assistance. She noticed how naturally he assumed a leadership role, organizing work crews, solving problems as they arose, all while ensuring that her wishes remained the priority. As sunset approached and workers began to disperse, Preston drew Zara aside. "I need to ride out to my ranch, check on things," he said, "but I'll be back tomorrow to help with the rebuilding." "You've done so much already," Zara protested. "Your own work must be suffering." "I've got good hands who can manage for a few days," he assured her. "This is more important right now." The simple statement, delivered without drama, touched Zara deeply. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why is this so important to you?" Preston was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving from the burned shop to her face. "Because you're important to me," he finally said, his voice low. "More than I expected, more than makes sense after knowing you such a short time." He took a deep breath. "When I saw those flames yesterday, knew you could have been inside, it made some things very clear to me." Zara's heart quickened at his words, at the intensity in his eyes. "What things?" "That I don't want to lose another chance at happiness." He reached out, gently touching her cheek. "That meeting you has awakened something in me I thought was dead and buried. That I care for you, Zara Thomas, more than I can properly express." The confession, offered without artifice or elaboration, was all the more powerful for its simplicity. Zara covered his hand with her own, holding it against her cheek. "I feel the same," she whispered. "It seems impossible after such a short time, but the heart knows what it knows," he finished for her, a smile touching his lips. "My Elizabeth used to say that. Far from feeling jealous at the mention of his late wife, Zara felt honored that he would share such a memory. "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Preston agreed, "and she would have liked you." After a moment, he added, "I'll be back tomorrow morning. Try to rest tonight." As Zara watched him ride away, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun, she felt a curious mixture of emotions: grief for what had been lost, determination to rebuild, and beneath it all, a growing certainty that whatever the future held, Preston Drake would be part of it. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Each morning, Preston would arrive early to work on the rebuilding, organizing volunteers and contributing his own considerable skills as a carpenter. Each evening, he would escort Zara to dinner at the cafe or the boarding house, their conversations gradually deepening as they shared more of their histories, their hopes, their dreams. A week after the fire, as they walked back to Mrs. Holloway's after dinner, Preston took Zara's hand. "There's something I'd like to show you tomorrow, if you can spare the time away from the rebuilding." "What is it?" she asked, curious at the slight nervousness in his manner. "My ranch," he said. "It's not much compared to Blackwood's spread, but it's mine, free and clear. I'd like you to see it." The invitation felt significant, as if he were offering to show her not just his property but a part of himself few had seen. "I'd like that very much," she replied. The next morning, Preston arrived with a wagon instead of his usual horse. "More comfortable for you than riding double," he explained as he helped her up to the seat. The journey to Preston's ranch took just over an hour, following a winding trail that led east from Shafter. As they traveled, the landscape opened up, revealing rolling hills dotted with mesquite and oak, interspersed with patches of grassland where cattle grazed. "It's beautiful," Zara said, taking in the vastness of the Texas countryside. "So different from St. Louis." "Takes some getting used to," Preston acknowledged. "All this space, the bigness of the sky, used to make me feel small and lost when I first came. Now it feels like freedom." They crested a gentle rise, and below them lay Preston's ranch, a neat collection of buildings nestled in a shallow valley beside a small creek. The main house was modest but well built, with a covered porch stretching across the front. Nearby stood a barn, corral, and several smaller outbuildings. A windmill turned lazily above a water tank, catching the morning breeze. "Home," Preston said simply as they descended toward it. Two cowboys emerged from the barn as they approached, waving in greeting. "That's Miguel and Tom," Preston explained. "Good men, both of them. Been with me almost since the beginning." After introducing Zara to his hands, Preston showed her around the property: the barn with its half-dozen horses, the small herd of Hereford cattle grazing in the near pasture, the vegetable garden he maintained behind the house. Everything was neat, practical, and well-maintained, reflecting the character of its owner. Inside, the house was similarly practical but comfortable. A large main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end. Two bedrooms opened off the main room, and a lean-to at the back housed a washroom. "It's not fancy," Preston said, watching Zara's face as she took it all in. "But it's solid. Built it myself with some help from Miguel and Tom." "It's wonderful," Zara said honestly. "It feels like a real home." Something in her tone made Preston look at her more closely. "You sound surprised." "I suppose I am a little," she admitted. "When you said you lived alone on a ranch, I imagined something more sparse, temporary." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You thought I was still drifting, even with land of my own." "Perhaps," she acknowledged. "But this," she gestured around the comfortable room, "this is a place built by someone who intends to stay." "I do," he said quietly. "For the first time since Elizabeth and Mary died, I feel rooted somewhere, like I belong." His eyes held hers, especially now. The implication in his words, in his gaze, made Zara's heart beat faster. They stood looking at each other in the sunlit room, something unspoken but powerful passing between them. The moment was broken by Miguel calling from outside that lunch was ready. They ate at the rough-hewn table on the porch, enjoying a simple but hearty meal of beans, cornbread, and fresh vegetables from the garden. The cowhands ate with them, sharing stories and gentle teasing that made it clear they respected their boss but weren't afraid of him. After lunch, Preston saddled 2 horses. "Thought you might like to see more of the place," he suggested. "If you're comfortable riding." "My father taught me as a girl," Zara assured him, "though it's been some years since I've had the opportunity." Preston helped her mount a gentle bay mare, his hand strong and steady at her waist. The touch, brief as it was, sent warmth spreading through her. They rode for over an hour, Preston pointing out the boundaries of his land, the creek that provided water year-round, the stands of oak that offered shelter for cattle in both summer heat and winter cold. Everywhere Zara looked, she saw evidence of careful stewardship, land that was used but not abused, managed with an eye to the future. "You love it here," she observed as they paused atop a rise overlooking the valley. Preston nodded. "Didn't expect to. When I won this place in that poker game, it was little more than a run-down shack and a few hundred acres of neglected rangeland. Figured I'd fix it up, sell it for a profit, move on." A smile touched his lips, but something about it got under my skin. Started thinking about what it could be, not just what it was. "And now it's home," he said simply. "First real home I've had since Kansas." He turned in his saddle to face her more directly. "Zara, there's something I need to ask you." The seriousness in his tone made her pulse quicken. "Yes, the rebuilding of your shop, it's coming along well. Another week, maybe 2, and you'll be back in business." He paused. "What happens then?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, once the crisis has passed, once things settle back to normal, where do we stand, you and me?" The directness of the question took her aback, though she'd been wondering the same thing herself. I don't know," she admitted. "This has all happened so quickly." "Too quickly?" he asked, watching her carefully. "No," she said after a moment. "Not too quickly, just unexpectedly." She met his gaze. "When I came to Shafter, starting a romance was the furthest thing from my mind. I was focused on the shop, on building a new life for myself. And now I can't imagine that life without you in it," she confessed. "But I also can't abandon what I came here to do. My aunt believed in me, in my ability to continue what she started. I need to honor that." Preston nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'd never ask you to give up your shop or your independence, Zara. That's part of who you are, part of what I—" He hesitated, then finished softly, "part of what I love about you." The word hung in the air between them, simple but profound. Zara's breath caught as she realized what he'd said, what he was offering. "Preston," she began, but he held up a hand to stop her. "You don't need to say anything now," he assured her. "I know it's soon. I know we've known each other only weeks, not years, but I've lived enough to recognize something real when I find it." He smiled slightly. "Just wanted you to know where I stand. The rest, well, that's up to you. However much time you need." They rode back to the ranch in a comfortable silence, each absorbed in their own thoughts. As they approached the house, Zara noticed a rider approaching from the direction of Shafter Sheriff Wilkins, moving at a fast trot. Preston tensed beside her. "Something's wrong," he muttered, spurring his horse forward to meet the sheriff. Zara followed, her heart racing with sudden fear. Had there been another fire? Was someone hurt? "Drake," the sheriff called as they drew near. "Been looking for you, got news." "What happened?" Preston demanded, pulling his horse to a stop beside the lawman. "Blackwood posted bail for the Sheltons this morning," Wilkins said grimly. Judge Harmon said it low, said the evidence was circumstantial. Preston cursed under his breath. Where are they now? That's just it. They rode out of town, heading east this way. Thought you should know they might be looking for trouble. Zara felt a chill run through her despite the warm afternoon sun. You think they're coming here, to Preston's ranch? The sheriff nodded. Could be. They were mighty sore about that beating you gave Curtis at the social, Drake, and now with the arson charges, they might be looking to settle scores. Preston's face hardened. Let them try. To Miguel, who had joined them, he said, Get Tom. Check the north pasture fences and bring the cattle closer to the house. Keep your rifles handy. As Miguel hurried to comply, Preston turned back to the sheriff. You riding back to town now? Was planning to, Wilkins confirmed. Got other folks to warn. Blackwood was in a foul mood when he left town. Seems Miss Thomas's refusal to sell even after the fire has him riled. No telling what he might do next. I should get back to Shafter, Zara said, worry creasing her brow. If there's going to be trouble, you're safer here, Preston interrupted firmly. At least until we know where the Sheltons are and what they're planning. To the sheriff, he added, Thanks for the warning, Wilkins. We'll be ready if they show their faces. After the sheriff departed, Preston quickly organized the ranch's defenses. Horses were brought in from the pasture, the house and barn secured, rifles and ammunition distributed. Through it all, Zara watched with growing admiration for his calm efficiency in the face of danger. What can I do to help? She asked as Preston checked the loading of a Winchester rifle. He glanced up, his expression softening. You could make some coffee, might be a long night. Grateful for something practical to do, Zara set about preparing coffee in the kitchen, finding supplies where Preston directed. As she worked, she couldn't help but notice how natural it felt to be moving about his home, as if she belonged there. The realization both startled and pleased her. Darkness fell with no sign of the Sheltons or any other threat. Preston insisted Zara take his bedroom while he kept watch from the porch with Miguel, sending Tom to rest with instructions to relieve them at midnight. Despite her exhaustion, Zara found sleep elusive in the unfamiliar room. Preston's scent clung to the pillow's leather, wood smoke, and something uniquely him surrounding her with an intimate reminder of the man keeping vigil outside. His words from earlier echoed in her mind. Part of what I love about you. Love. Such a simple word for such a complex emotion. Did she love him in return? The answer came with surprising clarity. Yes, she did. Despite the brevity of their acquaintance, despite the chaos that had surrounded them since they met, something true and deep had taken root between them. She must have dozed off eventually, for she woke with a start to the sound of horses approaching. Dawn was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky as she hurriedly dressed and moved to the main room. Preston stood by the window, rifle in hand, peering out at the yard. Stay back, he warned as she approached. Who is it? She whispered, her heart pounding. Blackwood, Preston replied grimly. And the Sheltons, 5 riders total. Before Zara could respond, a voice called from outside. Drake, come on out, we need to talk. Preston exchanged glances with Miguel, who stood ready by the door, his own rifle held casually but competently. Stay inside, he instructed Zara. No matter what happens. Preston, she began, but he silenced her with a gentle touch to her cheek. Trust me, he said softly. With that, he moved to the door, opening it just enough to call back. Kind of early for social calls, Blackwood. What do you want? Just a friendly conversation, came the reply. About the future of Shafter, and Miss Thomas's place in it. Preston stepped onto the porch, rifle held ready but not aimed. Zara moved to the window, fear clutching at her heart as she saw Victor Blackwood sitting astride a magnificent black horse in the ranch yard. Flanking him were the Shelton brothers and two other men she didn't recognize, hired guns by the look of them. "Nothing to talk about," Preston called back. "Miss Thomas has made her position clear. The shop's not for sale." "Actually," Blackwood replied, his tone conversational, "I'm no longer interested in buying just the millinery. Recent events have convinced me I need to take a more comprehensive approach to my investments in Shafter." He gestured expansively. "Including certain troublesome ranches that stand in my way." Preston's posture stiffened, but his voice remained steady. "This land isn't for sale either, Blackwood." "Everything has a price, Drake," Blackwood replied, his pleasant tone at odds with the menace in his words. "Sometimes that price is in dollars, sometimes it's paid in other ways." Curtis Shelton snickered, his hand resting on his holstered pistol. "Like burning down a hat shop," he said loudly, apparently unable to resist boasting. "Might be your ranch burns next, Drake. Or maybe something happens to that pretty milliner you're sweet on." Rage flashed across Preston's face, but before he could respond, the sound of approaching horses came from the direction of town. All heads turned to see Sheriff Wilkins cresting the rise, accompanied by at least a dozen mounted men, ranchers, and townsmen from Shafter, all armed. "Told you I had other folks to warn, Blackwood," the sheriff called as they approached. "Seems Miss Thomas has made quite an impression on the good people of Shafter." Blackwood's confident expression faltered as he took in the newcomers. Among them, Zara recognized Dr. Winslow, Mr. Finch, Mr. Gunderson, and several other prominent citizens of the town. "This is a private business matter," Blackwood said stiffly. "No need for the whole town to involve themselves. Threatening a lady and trying to burn her out of business stopped being private a while back," the sheriff replied. "As did threatening one of the most respected ranchers in the county." Mr. Finch urged his horse forward. "We've had enough of your bullying, Blackwood. Miss Thomas stands with Shafter, and Shafter stands with her." Murmurs of agreement came from the assembled men. Blackwood's face darkened with anger, but he was shrewd enough to recognize when he was outmatched. With a tight nod to his companions, he turned his horse. "This isn't over, Drake," he called back. "Nor for you, Miss Thomas," he added, having spotted Zara watching from the window. "Actually," Sheriff Wilkins said, "it is over. Curtis Shelton just confessed to arson right in front of me and a dozen witnesses." He nodded to two of his men. "Arrest him." What followed was brief but violent. Curtis drew his gun, firing wildly as the sheriff's men approached. Preston shoved Miguel inside and took cover, returning fire from the porch. Blackwood and his remaining men galloped away, leaving Curtis to his fate when the gunsmoke cleared. Curtis Shelton lay wounded but alive in the ranch yard, his right arm shattered by a bullet. Sheriff Wilkins and his men quickly disarmed and restrained him. "He'll live," Dr. Winslow pronounced after a brief examination. "Enough to stand trial for arson and attempted murder." As the excitement died down and the various townsmen dismounted to accept Preston's offer of coffee, Zara emerged from the house. Her eyes sought Preston immediately, needing to assure herself he was unharmed. He crossed to her quickly, concern written on his features. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she assured him. "Just shaken. Are you hurt?" "Not a scratch," he said, a smile breaking through his worried expression. "Turns out I had more friends in Shafter than I realized." Sheriff Wilkins approached, removing his hat as he greeted Zara. "Miss Thomas, sorry about the excitement. When I got back to town yesterday and told folks about the Sheltons being out for revenge, there was nearly a stampede of volunteers wanting to ride out here. Had to convince half of them to stay behind and guard the town." "I don't know how to thank you all," Zara said, looking around at the men who had come to their defense. "You barely know me, yet you risked yourselves. You stood up to Blackwood when most wouldn't, Mr. Gunderson said simply. That counts for something in these parts. Besides, Dr. Winslow added with a twinkle in his eye, my wife would never forgive me if anything happened to the woman making her new hat. The tension broken. Everyone laughed, the relief palpable in the morning air. As the townsmen prepared to return to Shafter, escorting the wounded Curtis Shelton to face justice, Preston drew Zara aside. Quite a morning, he said, his eyes searching hers. Are you sure you're all right? I am now, she replied honestly. Seeing all these people come to help us. It's overwhelming. Not just helping me, Preston pointed out. They came for you too, Zara. You've become part of Shafter in just a few short weeks. The realization warmed her heart. I suppose I have, she agreed. It feels like home now in a way sent. Louis never quite did. Preston took her hands in his expression turning serious. There's something I need to say, and after this morning I don't want to wait any longer to say it. He took a deep breath. I love you, Zara Thomas. I know it's fast. I know we've known each other only a short time, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Joy welled up inside her, bright and unstoppable as the Texas sunrise. I love you too, she replied simply. I think I have since that first day in the saloon when you stood up for a stranger with your gun still smoking. Preston's face transformed with happiness, years seeming to fall away as he drew her closer. Marry me, he said softly. Not today or tomorrow, whenever you're ready. But say you will eventually. Yes, Zara replied without hesitation. Yes, I will. Their lips met in a kiss that seemed to seal their future tender at first, then deepening with the promise of all that lay ahead. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, it was to find the sheriff and several townsmen watching with broad grins. About time, Sheriff Wilkins remarked dryly. Been taking bets in town on how long it would take you two to figure things out. Amidst good-natured laughter and congratulations, plans were quickly made. Preston would return to town with the group to give a formal statement about Curtis Shelton's confession. Zara would remain at the ranch with Miguel and Tom until Preston returned, deemed safer than having her travel while Blackwood and the other Sheltons were still at large. As Preston prepared to leave, he took Zara aside once more. I'll be back by nightfall, he promised. And then we can talk properly about our future. Our future, she echoed, loving the sound of those words together. It has a nice ring to it. His kiss was swift but tender, the best sound I've heard in years. 2 months later, Thomas Millinery reopened in a fully rebuilt shop on Main Street in Shafter. The grand opening drew customers from as far as Fort Worth, drawn by stories of the beautiful hats created by the young milliner who had stood up to Victor Blackwood. Blackwood himself had left Texas shortly after Curtis Shelton's arrest, rumors suggesting he had financial troubles beyond Shafter that required his attention. The remaining Shelton brothers had followed their employer, much to the town's relief. Curtis was serving a 10-year sentence in the state prison for arson and attempted murder. The bell above the shop door jingled merrily as Preston entered on opening day, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. Zara looked up from where she was arranging a display, her face lighting up at the sight of him. Right on time, she said, crossing to meet him. Mrs. Eldridge just left with the most extravagant hat I've ever created. I think she bought it just to spite Blackwood. Preston chuckled. Wouldn't surprise me. Half the ranchers in the county have been finding excuses to do business in Shafter lately just to show their support. He handed her the package, a small gift to celebrate your reopening. Zara unwrapped it carefully to reveal a beautifully carved wooden sign, Thomas and Drake Millinery. I thought perhaps after the wedding. Preston began, a question in his eyes. It's perfect, Zara assured him, tracing the carved letters lovingly. "A new beginning for both of us." Their wedding was set for the following month, a simple ceremony in the Shafter church, followed by a celebration at Preston's ranch, now their ranch. Zara would maintain the millinery in town, traveling back and forth as needed, while Preston would continue building his cattle operation. It wasn't a conventional arrangement by any means, but it suited them perfectly. As they stood together in the sunlit shop, surrounded by the hats and trimmings that represented Zara's art and Preston's support, she reflected on the strange path that had brought them together: a woman's scream, mocking laughter, a gunshot that silenced the mockers. "What are you thinking about?" Preston asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "The day we met," Zara replied. "How something so frightening turned out to be the beginning of everything wonderful." Preston's arms encircled her waist, drawing her close. "I knew you were special the moment I saw you standing up to those men in the saloon. Never met a woman with such courage. And I never met a man willing to defend a stranger with nothing to gain," she returned, leaning into his embrace. "Nothing to gain," he echoed, a smile in his voice. "I gained everything that day, Zara Thomas. Everything that matters." As their lips met in a kiss that spoke of love found and futures entwined, the Texas sun streamed through the shop window, gilding them both in light, a fitting beginning for two people who had found in each other not just love, but home. 5 years later, the sound of children's laughter echoed across the ranch yard as 3-year-old James Drake chased his year-old sister Emma in a wobbly game of tag. Watching from the porch of the expanded ranch house, Zara smiled at their antics, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly where their third child grew. "They're getting faster," Preston observed, joining her on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. "James nearly caught that chicken yesterday." "Your son has your determination," Zara replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "And Emma has your fearlessness. Did you see her trying to climb into the corral this morning?" Preston chuckled. "She'll be riding before she can properly walk at this rate." His gaze softened as it moved from their children to his wife. "How are you feeling today?" "Better than yesterday," Zara assured him. "Dr. Winslow says another month, perhaps less." The last 5 years had brought changes to both their lives and to Shafter itself. The Thomas and Drake millinery had thrived, eventually expanding to include a second location in Fort Worth, managed by Mary Finch, who had become Zara's business partner. The ranch had grown too, now one of the most respected cattle operations in the county, with Miguel promoted to foreman overseeing several additional hands. Shafter had grown alongside them. New businesses and families attracted by the town's reputation for independence and community spirit. The defeat of Victor Blackwood had become something of a local legend, retold with increasing embellishment at social gatherings. Their marriage had settled into a comfortable rhythm, with Zara dividing her time between the millinery and the ranch, especially after James was born. When Emma arrived 2 years later, they had expanded the ranch house, adding rooms for their growing family and a dedicated space where Zara could work on special orders from home. "Penelope Winslow stopped by the shop yesterday," Zara mentioned, sipping her coffee. "She's organizing the Founders' Day celebration next month and wants us both on the committee." Preston groaned good-naturedly. "More meetings." "It's the 5th anniversary of Blackwood's departure from Shafter," Zara reminded him. "Apparently that's cause for celebration." "Can't argue with that," Preston conceded. He stretched an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close against the cooling evening air. "Hard to believe it's been 5 years." "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Zara said softly. "Other times, it's as if I've always been here with you." "Best 5 years of my life," Preston said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Though I suspect the next 5 might be even better." As if on cue, James raced up the porch steps, his dark hair so like his father's tousled from play. "Papa, come see what I found." Preston scooped up his son with a laugh. "What treasure have you discovered now, cowboy?" As her husband and son headed toward the barn, Emma toddling determinedly after them, Zara felt a profound sense of contentment wash over her. From the ashes of that fire 5 years ago, she had built not just a successful business but a family, a home, a life filled with more love than she had ever imagined possible. She thought briefly of her Aunt Harriet, wondering if she had somehow known, when she left the millinery to her niece, that she was offering not just a shop but a doorway to a new world. Perhaps she had. Perhaps some part of her had sensed that Shafter, Texas with its dust and heat and stubbornness, was exactly where Zara belonged. As the sunset painted the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson, Zara rose to join her family, one hand supporting her belly where new life grew. The future stretched before them bright, promising, and theirs to shape together. Just as they had rebuilt from ashes once before, they would continue building their life one day at a time, with love as their foundation. In the distance, a lone coyote called, its voice rising clear and wild in the gathering dusk. Zara smiled, recognizing in that sound the spirit of her adopted home, fierce, free, and enduring, like the love that had begun with a scream, laughter, and a smoking gun.